As we continue to go through the next hour or so, I do want to show you something. Jason and I were just looking at this right here, a little bit of spin going on around Sarasota. Now, that does not mean there's a tornado warning. There is not, but we are still in a tornado watch until 8 o'clock. So certainly the conditions are favorable for the development of tornadoes. We've already seen a few tornado warnings earlier this morning, and it makes a ton of sense because you got this giant spinning storm out here. And with all of that rotation in the atmosphere, it is very common to see water spouts develop, and right along the coast, they can briefly move on shore. So just add something else to the list of things that we've got to deal with over the next 4 or 5 hours. Now, I want to show you something. So I took this about 30 minutes ago, and look how far north. This storm is now moving at 20 miles an hour. It is really picking up its forward speed. And that is a good thing in a sense because, one, the faster it moves, the less time it has over all that warm water, so it's not going to have as long of an opportunity to develop. But what we have been noticing, and I just posted about this on Facebook, so we had a cluster of lightning right here in the northern eye wall. That is almost always indicative of strengthening. You see a little blowup of convection, a blowup of thunderstorms, and when that happens, you often see the storm get stronger in the next 60 to 90 minutes thereafter. Now, I want to show you something else. So ultimately, as this moves in this direction, and it will be pretty much where that is in about another 45 minutes, it's still 113 miles offshore. We were talking about this earlier. I get it. You're sitting at home, you're bored, you don't know what to do. So what do? You start scrolling through your phone. You start scrolling through social media. You start scrolling through all the posts. And all the posts, there are so many. I was doing it myself. There's so many of them. Oh, look, it's turning more toward the coast. Oh, look, they don't know what they're talking about. Oh, look. No, this track is not changing. It isn't. It is going exactly where the models have been forecasting for 2 or 3 days. Now, might there be a 15-mile difference upon landfall? Sure. And I think if that happens, it probably would be closer to the western side of Taylor County and maybe a little bit farther away from Tallahassee. It's a close call. And we're hoping, honestly, that might be the case because if it goes to the east, there's a lot fewer people there, and maybe the impacts would be a little bit lower. But overall, looking at the winds, now these are the gusts, and this is what we've had. We just had a gust of 67 in Bradenton and 67 in Sarasota and 60 in St. Pete. So you're now really beginning to feel the impacts in the southern counties. And think about it, again, it's moving this way, so the heavier winds will go from south to north. But as we've been saying, we do not expect sustained hurricane force winds. That means winds of 74 or greater for 60 seconds straight. What we'll have is gusty winds that'll come up and kick up really strong for a few seconds and then come back down again. But at the end of the day, you get a gust for a few seconds of 60, 65, 70, you're going to see power outages. And we've already been reporting about all the power outages we have, and we're going to continue to see that, I'd say, until about 10 or 11 o'clock tonight. And then by then, the majority of our area will be through with this. Again, it's moving that quickly. But the water, the surge, is going to be the biggest issue with this. I mean, yes, the majority of us think about the winds because, let's be honest, the majority of us don't have to deal with storm surge. I mean, that is only people who are on the water or the bay or maybe a river that attaches to the bay or the Gulf. But if you look at just the coloring, the blue color is the tropical storm warning. That's the majority of our area. If you don't live on the water, and I know some people are confused by this. By the way, it's now moving northeast at 21 miles an hour. I mean, it's really going fast. But my point is, again, if you don't live on the water, you are not going to be impacted by storm surge. This is not rainwater. This is not flooding. I think a lot of people get confused over that because with Debbie, we had 20, 25 inches of rain, and there were a lot of spots that flooded significantly, horrible flooding in Manatee and Sarasota, and that had nothing to do with storm surge. For people who don't understand the concept of storm surge, it's real simple. It's water that's pushed in from the Gulf. That's all it is. As that storm moves in our direction, it pushes the water in. And once, I want you to look at this. So imagine you're right here, let's say. Okay, let's say in Dunedin or whatever. You've got more of an offshore flow. The winds are still blowing in that direction. But once the center passes where you are, the winds look down south. Look where the winds are coming from there in Sarasota and Venice. They're getting an onshore flow. In other words, the water is being pushed in. Remember when Irma came in and the bay drained? Literally, if you weren't here, it was crazy. Tampa Bay itself, it practically drained out because it was a big storm, and out ahead of it, it pushed the offshore flow, pushed everything offshore. But once it passed, the water comes rushing back in. Now, that's not happening, at least we haven't had any reports of that. But at the end of the day, my point is, you're going to be looking at water being pushed in as this center passes wherever it is that you live, okay? That will be this evening. So as we approach high tide again, and the high tides vary between 10 o'clock at Clearwater, Davis Islands is closer to 2 a.m. Between 10 o'clock p.m. and 2 a.m., that's when high tide arrives, depending on where you are. That is when the water will be at its highest. Yes, by then the storm will already be, heck, maybe in Georgia. Jason, that's probably legit, right? By 2 a.m., it's probably going to be in Georgia.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're talking about a storm that is already in Georgia and still giving us floods. That's how large, I mean, look at it. That's how large it is. And one other thing, and I get it. People are looking at radar and say, oh, look, it's wobbling right toward the coast. No, it's just a lopsided looking egg kind of a storm. And if you roll an egg, it kind of wobbles as you roll it, right? Well, this is the exact same thing. So it has that look that it might be going a little bit more. But look at the line here. It is perfectly straight, and it's going to go right up there into the Big Bend and, you know, hopefully a little bit east of Tallahassee. But the updated track comes out in a half hour. I mean, usually the Hurricane Center doesn't even like to change the track when you're within 6 hours of landfall. It's kind of a moot point at that point. I mean, maybe they bump it east 5 miles, 10 miles. But right now it is very likely that Tallahassee will be on the west side, potentially the west eye wall. But if it can go a little bit more, we're talking 10 miles, 15 miles more to the east, that would limit the amount of extreme wind because, again, that extreme wind with these storms usually extend no more than 5, 7, maybe 8 miles out from the center. When you see that 120 right there, that is not the whole storm. It's a little bitty area that the hurricane hunters found as they're flying around and found sustained winds, 60 seconds, remember, of 120-mile-an-hour winds. So overall, the wind field isn't nearly that strong, but it is that large. So that's why we're going to continue to see this go on for at least another 6 or 7 hours. But because it is moving quickly, that's better than the alternative, which is a slow-moving system like Debbie. These numbers are real, all right? I know a lot of us have a tendency to think, well, you know, they're trying to scare us or they're giving us worst-case scenario. I mean, yes, by definition, these numbers are the most reasonable worst-case scenario. That comes directly from the Hurricane Center. And usually when we see these numbers, we're on the left side. I went back and checked out for the last 30, 40 years. Typically, the forecast ends up within this parameter, but usually on the left side of it, usually a little lower. We just took a power hit over on the weather computer. That's not a good thing. But then over here, this is the worst case scenario. And I will tell you, the numbers that we're seeing, there's a legitimate chance some folks are going to be seeing those higher numbers between 8 o'clock tonight and 1 o'clock in the morning. So I'll say one more time. You've heard it over and over again, and I get it. You're probably not going to change your mind. But if you live in an area that is flood prone, or especially that flooded in let me tell you a story. This was with the dog. And by the way, this is the way our coverage goes from now until 10, 11, midnight, whenever. We're going to be here 24/7 for you guys. But this is not like a traditional newscast where we're just sitting here giving. There's a lot of interaction. You guys respond to us and whatnot. But I was talking to somebody last year with Adalia, and she lived in Crystal Beach, which is in northwestern Pinellas County. And the water came up a lot stronger than she thought it would, a lot higher than she thought. She literally had a shop vac out in her house. And about 3 a.m., she was taking the shop vac and getting the water as it was coming into her house until she lost power and could no longer use the shop vac, and then the water came in. The water with Adalia is lower than the water that we're going to see with Helene. It is going to be higher. This storm will be higher. A buddy of mine who lives locally, meteorologist who travels the world, talks to the UN, the guy knows his stuff, texted me about a half hour ago, said, I hope people realize that the flooding here is going to be worse than it's been in decades. Those were his words. So I'm just telling you, don't belittle these numbers. Don't minimize them. You still have time to go. I mean, because you only have to go 5 miles inland. I mean, you know, things can be rebuilt. We've told that story over and over again. Look, you can replace your belongings, but not your people. And if it's a matter of being now, are we going to see in our area, it's a valid point, are we going to see surge in our area like Ian had? No, we are not. Look, they had a 15 to 20 foot surge. In our area, we are not going to see it. So it's not even a legitimate comparison. Now, up in the Panhandle, oh yeah. Yeah, in the Panhandle, the Big Bend, they are going to see numbers like that. But we are still going to see flooding, maybe not the kind of flooding that will cause issues in terms of people drowning per se, although that is always a possibility if you're on one of the high sides, the 10 to 12. But the bottom line is you might only have to go in 5 miles. Like literally, just get in the car and go in 5 miles and come back in the morning and see where you are. But those kind of little small decisions can be life-saving. And you know, when you continue to get the notifications with the big alarms on your phone, bah, 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 there's a reason for that. They're trying to get your attention because this is a significant water threat with surge on the coast. This is not inland. This is not rainwater. This is not flooding. This is Gulf water, salt water pushing in. Lastly, about power outages, yeah, we're going to have some power outages. We've already had lots. Wendy and Nadine, what was the latest power outage that we had?
Yes, actually, I just 116,000 in the state of Florida right now, but our area, Tico, 11,500, Duke, 13,000, FPL, Manatee, 3,000, Sarasota, 2,500. So yeah,
about 30,000.
Yeah, there's definitely.
Timing,
oh, look at you with the numbers.
Yeah, a little math in my head there. Yeah. A little bit over 30,000 in our area.
Don't challenge him with numbers. He's so good at it.
But it hasn't really started that much. Now, southern counties have. Jason and I were just looking at some numbers. Yeah, Venice and Sarasota, they're getting gusts in the 60s. So, I mean, even St. Pete is too. So we are going to have power outages. So expect that. So you know what? Charge your cell phone right now before you lose your power. You can watch us on streaming. You can listen to us on radio simulcasting. Because if you do lose power for a period of time and then it gets night, it gets dark out, that's a scary thing because you have no outlet. You don't know what's going on. So I suggest right now, charge your phones, charge your cell phones, get them fully charged. And if you are to lose power, you could probably at least have several hours because this won't last that long. And my guess is, this takes us to 10 o'clock and then by midnight and tomorrow morning it's gone. So I would expect whatever power outages we have will probably be rectified pretty quickly. This is not going to be a major wind storm for us. Is it windy? Yes. Some trees? Yes. But not the kind of stuff that I think a lot of folks fear when they hear the word hurricane. Up north, it will be. But overall, there still could be 6 hours, 12 hours. Maybe you don't have power, and it's a good idea to charge your phone now. At the very least, you'll have a light on your phone to walk around. So, I mean, there's little things, little tips that you might think of that come into play over the next couple of hours and right on through the evening.